Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. First of all, allow me to thank all the persons who made contributions to the debate, my colleagues on this side of the House that supported the bill, and the colleagues on the other side of the House who spoke to the bill. I would have thought that a groundbreaking piece of legislation like this would have gotten the unreserved support of everyone in the House. And it is quite unfortunate that the two members who represented the opposition did not support the bill. Nevertheless, I think in their presentations, they did acknowledge that this is a very important piece of legislation. And I want to assure them that, let's think about this in a logical way. Right now, in this country, we are doing transfusion. However, we don't have a specific piece of law that governs transfusion in this country. This bill seeks to remedy that deficiency. So I cannot see what is wrong with us introducing now for the first time, after so many decades of doing transfusion, a piece of legislation to govern how transfusions would be done. As I said in my opening speech, our first transplant was done on the 12th of July, 2008. That's a kidney transplant. Again, we have done about 66 such kidney transplants in this country without any piece of legislation. No legislation in place. This government was the one who thought that it was important for us to put the safeguards in place, put the rules in place, put the law in place, and to specify that if anybody breached these laws, this would be the punishment that they would get. So we are coming from a place where we had nothing, and we are now putting that structure in place. And it is really unfortunate that the members do not understand this and continue to argue. I sometimes am trying to decipher what they were really arguing for. Similarly with corneal transplant, we have done 99 of those. And again, nothing in place, we are putting something in place. But, Mr. Speaker, what is even more troubling, the Honorable Dr. Karen Cummins, in the beginning of her presentation, took time off to inform us that she is speaking as a medical doctor and as a public health specialist. And that's commendable. But what is not commendable is that during her presentation, at one point, and I wrote it down here, she pointedly said that this bill has the potential to kill. Nowhere in this bill does it say that we have any potential to kill. What this bill seeks to do is really to prolong the life of people, to give life, because many of the persons who would benefit from kidney transplants are those who would be suffering from end-stage renal disease, and the only alternative other than dialysis is for them to have a transplant. And this is what is going to prolong their life. Right now, for the 66 patients that we have transplanted, and more recently those that we have done last year, among them I think was a 14-year-old child. The mother gave that child her kidney. And because of that donation, that child would have a very long life. When I spoke to them, when I spoke to that family, I recall the distress of that mother. I recall the challenges that that child was facing. And because we were able to do this transplant, that child is going to live for quite a long time. So this thing does not kill people. This is to enhance the quality of life for persons. And that's what this bill is all about. If you take time off to speak with the doctors who have been doing transplant, those that are at the Georgetown Public Hospital, they would tell you how long they were trying to get such a piece of legislation in place. Because if we want to be known as a jurisdiction that is doing proper transplant medicine, then we have to put the legal and ethical framework in place. All the experts, whether from Spain, whether from the US, whether from Canada, the UK, the Caribbean, all the experts that we have consulted, all of them want us to have strong legal and ethical framework in place. That is what this legislation is providing for all of us. And you know, I recall some years ago when we were having one of those debates, and I think when the Deputy Speaker spoke and he spoke about cervical cancer, it reminded me of that incident in this Parliament. Because under the then Minister of Health, Dr. Barry Ramsaran, we had introduced HPV vaccination in this country. And the lead speaker for the opposition at that point in time, Dr. George Norton, got up and made some very outrageous remarks about HPV vaccination in Guyana. And among those remarks was that giving HPV vaccines to the children of this country to protect them from cervical cancer was tantamount to the Tuskegee experiment that happened in the United States. That was what was said in this house. And I remember coming sometime after him and explaining that that's never our intention, because we want to protect the children, especially the women of this country, from cervical cancer. Today, we heard an association somehow between what we are trying to do in terms of transplantation, in terms of regenerative medicine, in terms of cell therapy. That was then somehow taken out of context and misruled. That somehow minorities, somehow this is related to ethnic cleansing, and by inference that maybe we'll take organs from some people and use them in such a program. And Mr. Speaker, I want to vehemently, I want to say from this floor that that's not the intention of this bill, and it is really abhorrent of a medical practitioner to really come and try to make that type of connection with this bill. It is a shame, it is a travesty, and we should not allow these things to happen, because, you know, this bill it's colorblind. The people who would benefit from this bill, we don't look at their color. It is a colorblind bill. Anybody, regardless of your race, regardless of your ethnicity, you would benefit from this bill. That's what this bill is about. And to try to come here and cast these types of aspersion is really not the place for this kinds of debate. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it was really disappointing. And I really do hope that in their quieter moments, that they would reflect that when we come to a place like the Parliament and with bills like this, it's not just to oppose for oppose's sake. Sometimes we have to look at what is for the greater good of the people of our country. And this bill, I would say, brings that greater good for the people of this country. This bill would enhance the quality of life for patients. And not only that, are we trying to bring regulations to what we are already doing. This is a forward-thinking bill, because the work that we want to do in regenerative medicine, the kinds of things that we want to do, would be a first in the Caribbean. And while I heard that somehow, and I think the Attorney General quite competently dismissed those types of aspersions that were cast on where we copy and what knockoff bill we took and all kinds of nonsense. When you look at what we have in this bill, I can safely say that there's no other bill in the region, in this Caribbean region, that talks about regenerative medicine in the way that we have done in this bill, that looks at transplant of cells, tissues in the way that we have done in this bill, and a new one, and that is looking at biofluids. This is a totally new concept, and we have made provision for that in this bill. So if it was a knockoff from something that was done in 2000, year 2000, these advances in medical science would not have been reflected. And I have had the good fortune of consulting with some of the world's premier experts in this area. And one of those experts would have been Mr. Cohen. This is a world-renowned expert. He is the Deputy Dean of Harvard Law. He reviewed this bill thoroughly and added comments to this bill. And that is why it is one of the best pieces of legislation in this hemisphere. So, Mr. Speaker, when it's necessary, we can borrow from others' jurisdiction. And when it's necessary, we are not afraid of advancing and putting things that are yet to come. And this bill straddles both areas, moving from putting in the regulations for what we are already doing and looking forward to the future of the technologies that would be here. And that's what we are trying to do with this bill. And as the Attorney General also said, this is just one of many bills in the health sector that will be coming, because we want to modernize the health sector. We want to make sure that we have all the legal provisions to ensure that we can deliver quality health care in this country. Mr. Speaker, again, I want to thank my colleagues who rose and supported me on this bill, and I want to thank the members of the opposition who spoke as well, and the Deputy Speaker. And as I've said in my opening remarks, there are many, many persons to thank. I've named some of them, but all those who I didn't get to touch on, I just want to express my gratitude. This here is a revolutionary piece of legislation, and it will take Guyana into the future. This is about 21st century medicine. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.